reading Chapter 3 of Constance Cumbey's book, A Planned Deception, Conscious Political Networking Then and Now. And remember, this was written in 1985. Networks and networking are the structures and processes through which the ideas and values come alive. Inspired by a vision of a peaceful yet dynamic planet, an entirely new culture is emerging in our land. It is connected by casual, ever-changing links among millions of people. As short-lived, self-camouflaging, a disciplinary crosshatches of activity, networks are invisible, unaccountable, and unpollable. Networks are stages on which dissonance is not only tolerated but encouraged, yet consensus is a common goal. From Networking, the First Report and Directory by Jessica Lipnack and Jeffrey Stamps. Most prominent New Agers say the emergence of the New World Order will take place through the process or combined efforts of many organizations. It has been, is being, and will continue through networking, fatally dependent on no single entity or individual. Marilyn Ferguson said one would look in vain for affiliations in traditional forms. She added, quote, "You find instead little clusters and loose networks. There are tens of thousands of entry points to this conspiracy. Wherever people share experiences, they connect sooner or later with each other and eventually with larger circles. Each day their numbers grow." Unquote. And remember, Marilyn Ferguson was writing a positive book about the New Age called The Aquarian Conspiracy. So when she says this conspiracy, she's meaning it in a positive way. Quote, "As the benefits of linkage and cooperation become more visible, networks have coalesced for just about every imaginable purpose." Unquote. There is an explosive sort of dynamics in this process, she says. Quote, "Once you have seen the power inherent in human alignment, you cannot think about the future in old terms. The explosion of networks in the past 5 years has been like a conflagration in a fireworks factory. This spiraling linkage, individuals with each other, groups with groups, is like a great resistance movement, an underground in an occupied country on the eve of liberation. Power is changing hands from dying hierarchies to living networks." Unquote. Of course, despite the statements of some to the contrary, one, if not the major purpose of this, the networking activity, is to lay the groundwork for the acceptance of a New Age Christ. As Donald Keyes said about networking, "Don't think for one moment that you can have a world government without a head." While the chapter in this book entitled Early New Age Centers covers the important early New Age centers, this chapter will discuss some early networking activity. Early cooperation occurred between the Theosophists and the Max Heindel's Oceanside, California Rosicrucians. Rosicrucian leader Max Heindel had deep admiration for Madame Blavatsky. He wrote a book about the importance of her work. In Europe, there was extensive New Age networking as well. Extremely energetic networking was well in place in the 1950s under the auspices of Queen Elizabeth of Belgium. She sponsored the Council Spirituel Mondial, World Spiritual Council. Many English and even international New Age organizations, including Lucis Trust and the highly apostate English Society of Friends, cooperated in these continental New Age networking activities. Those Aquarian conspirators had a magazine called The Aquarian Path. Its statement of purpose read, "The Aquarian Path exists to encourage the inner development of the individual and harmony in daily living. For this reason, it includes articles on all branches of esoteric and Eastern philosophy, occultism, mysticism, and allied subjects. By precession of the equinox, the sun appears at the vernal equinox to be passing through each constellation of the celestial zodiac in turn, completing the whole cycle in approximately 25,800 years. At the present time, it is passing from Pisces into Aquarius, from whence we derive the name Aquarian Age. The Aquarian path seeks to anticipate the coming of this new 2,000-year cycle. Unquote. I own a rare bound set of the 1952 issues of that English New Age networking magazine. It is published by the Aquarian Society, an English New Age federation of occult organizations. That statement would fit as well any modern New Age magazine. It would also have not been out of place in a Hitlerian era periodical. They too believed they were launching the Age of Aquarius. Oh yes, they did. As interesting as the philosophy were the associations, the magazine issues show that at least as of 1952, the following New Age organizations, among many others, were harmoniously networking: the Theosophical Society, corresponding Fellows Lodge, the Rosicrucians, AMORC, or AMORC, San Jose, California, World Spiritual Council, Society of Friends, English Quakers, the Buddhist World Publications, The Voice, Scientology, World Goodwill / Lucius Trust, Pasadena Theosophical Society, the School of Hermes, Midland School of Self-Knowledge, Universal Association of Affiliated Brotherhoods, the Institute of Pyramidology, Rosicrucian Fellowship, Max Heindel, Oceanside, California, Anthroposophical Society, that's Rudolf Steiner founded, and Woking Mosque. The World Spiritual Council. The Friends Meeting House on Euston Road in London was used for many New Age events. One such affair was held from May 16th through the 20th of 1952. There was sessions of the Congress of World Spiritual Council. This was the sessions of the Congress of the World Spiritual Council. Its purposes sounded very much like the Unity and Diversities Councils. Quote, a Congress of the World Spiritual Council organized by the President and Committee of the English section will be held at the Friends House, Euston Road, and in Hove on May 16th through 20th, 1952. The World Spiritual Council is an organization listed amongst the non-governmental organizations of UNO and seeking to get together the maximum of men of goodwill of all beliefs to seek together solutions for human problems without abandoning their own religious and philosophical convictions. It is not an enterprise for conversion, but for pure collaboration, and it seeks to establish a vast synthesis of the religious philosophies and cultures of East and West, between the ideologies of right and left, between the aspirations of the questing seeker and of the masses, in order to contribute to the building of peace and brotherhood. It also has the aim of creating or convoking conferences and all types of works having as object the creation of spiritual, scientific, social, and artistic goodwill. It is specifically engaged now in work for displaced children and child victims of war. The Bahais and the Theosophical Society. Pause. This is interesting. I can't remember which friend of mine. I have a friend that believes the Bahai is going to be the ultimate one world religion. But let's read. London in 1914 was a beehive of occult and syncretistic activity. An August 1914 article appeared in The Theosophist showed theosophical fostering of Bahai activity. Its author was Eric Hammond, a theosophist and author of several books on the Baha'is. Quote, London is naturally a center towards which leaders of thought find themselves attracted, and their creeds or systems are sooner or later stated in that city by the printed or spoken word. In London, as also in Paris, in New York, and elsewhere, a Persian prophet, Abdul Baha, has recently received appreciative hearing. Audiences have welcomed him in churches, lecture halls, and drawing rooms. Nearly 70 years old, he carries himself with aristocratic dignity and grace. He is possessed of singular courtesy and appealing charm. His countenance discloses the beauty of a soul made perfect through suffering, a suffering born for the welfare of others than himself. Of the potential of the Baha'is, Hammond enthusiastically wrote, "The hundreds of Babis, I'm not sure, of early days have multiplied, now into millions. Baha'u'llah selected his successor with unfailing insight. Abdul Baha appropriated the burden of the prophecy. Born amid the suffering of his people, upborne by absolute assurance of faith, he supported the Baha'is throughout the austerities of their mutilated existence at Akka. Administrative changes, happy for him and them, have at last allowed him to move beyond the limitations that confined him. His adventures in Europe and America have afforded opportunities for personally conveying his message to the West, his message of the most great peace, of the divine origin and unity of mankind, and of practical attendance on the guiding light, the glory of God." TRANET defines networking. TRANET, a transnational network for appropriate alternative technologies, defines networking as, quote, "Networking is a blind activity. If you do your work well, you never know it. Your job is linking people directly to one another. Links may form and multiply and strengthen, weaving the network even larger, stronger, and more coherent. But the networker who provides the original contact information does not need to be and should not be aware of the health of her growing offspring." This is an obvious New Age organization. It says it seeks to synthesize the various factions, political and spiritual, of the New Age movement. Therefore, its editors must have either been alarmed or amused at some of their reader response to a recent survey. Evidently, some of their subscribers either read The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow or very similar material. They perhaps did not comprehend their own unwitting participation. Perhaps believing Walter Martin's assertions that the New Agers were not politically networked, these subscribers wrote TRANET and asked it to please be wary of the New Age spiritual movement. TRANET's membership solicitation letter is reprinted in the appendix to this book. It shows they are very much aware of all aspects of the New Age movement, including the spiritual ones. This confirms my belief that many in the New Age movement are innocently involved. As I said in The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, quote, "Frustratingly, most of the participants in these New Age networks are quite innocently involved. Either they do not know the true aims and intents of its leadership, or, more often, they are operating under the influence of extremely sophisticated forms of mind control. Millions of human beings are involved with the New Age movement in all its phases and levels of activity. The hierarchy of the movement has successfully managed to draw from a full spectrum of society to implement eventual aims that can only benefit a small percentage, if anyone at all. Millions have been deceived into supporting projects designed to eventually strip even themselves of their civil liberties, much of their property, their preferred religion, and perhaps even their lives. Sadly, the vast majority of New Agers are involved quite innocently. Their motives are often altruistic. They wish to help, not harm their fellow human beings. Most of them lack knowledge of the ultimate goals of the movement," unquote. And that was from The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow. How could they stay in this movement and remain innocent? The above statement from TRANET shows how. In effect, they have been told none of your business. Some of the most important New Age networking confederations include Lucis Trust's World Goodwill. A list of organizations they have networked with in the past year is included in the appendix. The Los Angeles-based Unity in Diversity Council, formerly called the International Cooperation Council, and Jessica and Jeffrey Stamps headed the Networking Institute. The latter has gained surprising prominence with the Japanese government. The Networking Institute was organized by former Fulbright scholar and Oxford student Jeffrey Stamps and his fellow Oxford journalist student Jessica Lipnack. Now married, they have successfully mixed raising their children with running their institute from their basement, what they call a 10-second commute. Japan, long in the vanguard of the new technology and the information age, has shown great enthusiasm for artificial intelligence. Isn't this interesting? Because it's 2024 and this was 40 years ago, talking about artificial intelligence. No longer is made in Japan a symbol of cheap production and shoddy labor. The Japanese have rapidly gained dominance in the industrial world, particularly in the high-tech, high-touch information society. Of course, the Shinto Buddhist-based Japanese religions are not hostile to the idea of a Maitreya the Christ. On October 4th, 1984, the Asahi Evening News featured an editorial supporting the work of Lipnack and Stamps Networking Institute. Quote, each one, organization/networker, has a different character, and their objectives are diverse, but they clearly point out that the significance embodied in these various movements is the same. Therein lies the new brilliance of the word network, unquote. It went on to say that the subtitle of networking, the first report and directory, was Discovering Another America. Was it coincidental that the newly formed Networking Research Society of Tokyo used as the theme of its first symposium on September 9th, 1984, Discovering Another Japan? The term, I think that was the term. Was it coincidental that the newly formed Networking Research Society of Tokyo used as the term of its first symposium on September 9th, 1984? Theme. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to read that sentence again. Was it coincidental that the newly formed Networking Research Society of Tokyo used as the theme of its first symposium on September 9th, 1984, Discovering Another Japan? It is frustrating that there are still Christian experts who continue to insist that there is no evidence whatsoever that the New Agers are politically linked in any way. Another important network is a supplemental effort to the Planetary Initiative. In many ways, it overlaps it, both in participants and objectives. That group is Robert Theobald's Communications Era Task Force. Theobald calls himself a futurist. He, along with New Age leader Robert Mueller, was engaged to give major speeches to the National Catholic Education Association's 1985 meeting in St. Louis, Missouri. Finally, another variation of networking is taking place under the auspices of an organization many have denied is New Age, but most clearly is. These are the Moonies, who have, together with the Church Universal and Triumphant, have successfully built bridges to right-wing organizations. Wow. So I have done some videos, and I'm about to put one out. I've been waiting, about the connections with the Moonies and right-wing organizations. And of course, we have the famous clip I always play with Mike Flynn quoting or praying the prayer of Elizabeth Clare Prophet of the Church Universal and Triumphant, and they've all successfully built bridges to right-wing organizations. Okay, so here's the chapter notes. Of course, I'm going to leave the link below so you can look up these things yourself. So, Chapter 4, Working Out the Plan. That is next. Thank you for listening or watching.
Run.
There's just one name that can keep you out of hell, and it's the name of Jesus. The name of Jesus.